Hi there. Welcome to today's Summer of Safety Live. I'm with Peter Riley from Helite. The Summer of Safety is a campaign to help inspire, educate and encourage people to embrace all aspects of safety. I think we take our safety around horses for granted, and so we're talking about a whole range of subjects that hopefully will teach you something new and will ensure that you and your horse stay safe. So good evening, Peter. Lovely to have you along.
Yeah.
Now, Peter, you're with Helite. How long have you been involved with Airvests?
10 years now. In fact, indirectly, a bit longer than that. So yeah, we're getting to understand them pretty well now. So
it sounds it, and I know you're not just involved in equestrian Airvest, but also motorcycle and lots of other areas.
Yeah, motorcycle and more recently cycling, but primarily horses and motorbikes.
Now, I know we talk a lot about safety equipment, and we talk about hats and body protectors and how important it is to look after them. But I think when it comes to Airvests, not necessarily a lot is known about how you should look after them. Why is it important, perhaps even more than say a body protector or a hat, to look after your Airvest?
Well, fundamentally, it's because it's going to try and look after you. You know, it's a piece of high performance safety equipment, which, if it works properly, it will do very likely to do an excellent job in an unpleasant accident, which is why maintenance is really important, because there are things that can go wrong if no maintenance exists.
And that's right. That's what's different. I think we always talk about body protectors being a static piece of equipment. It's always there, always doing its job, doesn't need to do anything before it does that, apart from you fall off or be kicked. But with an Airvest, it has got moving parts, hasn't it? So it's those moving parts that you need to look after.
Mechanical Airvest have several moving parts. And, you know, a 10-year-old Airvest that has had no maintenance whatsoever might not be performing the way it did 10 years ago for a number of reasons. So therefore, the maintenance is really important.
Yeah, I think that's really
try as much as we can with.
Exactly. So first of all, when you get your Airvest and you want to actually look after it properly, how should you actually, firstly, once you've used it, whether it be at the end of a ride or at the end of a season, how should you actually store them?
Well, storing them hanging up would be good. Try not to store them in a dark environment, damp environment, because those are the ingredients which can create some problems occasionally. If it's hung up and it's in a regular cupboard with other equestrian gear, that's absolutely fine. But we want to avoid damp and cold environments for storing an Airvest. Really.
What will damp do to
it? Well, damp. 10 years ago, damp was capable of creating some kind of rusting if the Airvest was left in a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, over the last 10 years, the components have already eradicated that with anti-rust, and some newer components are cleverer than they were 10 years ago. So that isn't the issue that it was. But we don't really want we don't want rodents active in a damp environment in the back of a stable yard. You know, that's not what we want, because they are capable of causing significant damage to an Airvest.
You wouldn't want a hole in it. You wouldn't want a hole bitten in it, would you?
Because obviously, holes in Airvests are not ideal. Although they can still operate, but they're not very efficient.
No, I can imagine. What about the canister? Should you always, if you're finished for the season, should you store it with or without the canister?
No, we would recommend storing it with the canister. I don't think there's a significant advantage to taking it out, as long as the temperature control is reasonable in the room that it's stored. We just don't want canisters stored in a very cold environment.
So what's too cold? should you
yeah, well,
freeze it?
CO2 doesn't perform as well under 10, under -10. So if we're out riding on one of those absolutely frosty mornings where it's really, really cold, the Airvest will still work, but because of CO2, it doesn't work quite as fast. It starts to slow down. So hence, that's what steers us in the direction of keeping it away from too much cold.
Oh, well, that makes sense. And what about high temperatures? Is either the vest itself or the canister particularly sensitive?
Getting over 45 degrees.
Normally we'd say that doesn't really apply, but considering we had 43 degrees weeks ago.
Well, it was quite exceptional. But yeah, we wouldn't. I'm sure nobody would store it in a heated facility, in a very hot facility. But we wouldn't want it by a red hot radiator all winter that was blasted.
And what happens if, I was going to say if you're using it in winter, but we all know it can happen in summer. If you're out and it gets really, really wet, what should you be thinking about then?
It'll perform absolutely fine in a really, really wet environment, but just hang it up on a clothes hanger and let it loose dry. We don't want to put them in tumble dryers. That's not going to, your tumble dryer isn't going to like it, and nor is your Airvest. So we must avoid that. So just a heated room, and just let it dry off in its own time. It'll be fine. It's water is not a big threat to an Airvest.
No, but drying, I can understand that. In terms of cleaning it, what are your recommendations for cleaning?
Well, just a regular, a light detergent with a bit of hot soap just to keep it clean is a good idea. If you do that regularly, you'll be surprised at how it stays clean. We see a number in motorcycling who've had very little attention and a lot of flies and a lot of activity, which we don't see as much of in the equestrian world, and that's because the consumer's done nothing, and they get dirty quite quickly. But if you just very, very light soap, any detergent really, bit of warm, sponge it down, it'll be amazing how it keeps its colour and keeps looking reasonably smart.
And so don't dip it in the bath and don't put it in a washing machine.
No, we don't really want it in the bath with you. The washing machine's an absolute no, because it can damage the environment of the airbag, and we're losing control of the environment of the airbag. We can lose control of what it's doing. So, and also it'll damage your washing machine apart from that. So,
and this, I know I read this in one of your tips, and it seems a bit obvious, but don't iron it. I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, but it's really important. It's a really important point. The iron and the airbag do not go. A polyurethane airbag that's heavily ironed, you can stick it together. And so it really isn't what we want to do. And also ironing on heat, ironing on names and transfers. No, thank you. Please don't do that. Because we can melt the polyurethane of the airbag and it sticks together and then it can't expand when it's activated, or if it was activated.
And is it something, if somebody got it really filthy, if they had a fall and it got absolutely filthy, can you actually wash it can people send it to you to be washed as part of the
a really unpleasant accident where something has gone horribly wrong and it's very dirty, and the consumer's concerned by what may or may not have happened to his air jacket. It's a good idea for us to have a look at it. Yes, by removing the airbag, we can put that jacket in the washing machine because the airbags come out, and we can inspect the airbag. And then it's the putting back in of the airbags, which is not easy, which is why we can't allow the consumer to do that. There's too many things that can go wrong. It's quite technically put together inside its shell, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And so when you're using your Airvest, in terms of looking after it, are there sort of things you should do on a daily basis just to check that everything's okay with it?
Yeah, just check that the canister, make sure that the canister's screwed in correctly. If somebody wasn't concentrating when they were put it in, just occasionally we see them and they haven't been fully screwed in. It's a concern, is that. Also, if the canister, if the Airvest has been activated, then it's very important that the canister holder at the bottom has been fully screwed in. Check your saddle strap attachment. Basic stuff, really. It could have come off when you're taking your saddle off and putting it onto a saddle rack in a storage facility at night or something like that. And basically, canister size checking is quite important, but it's unlikely that you're putting the wrong canister in it. But there's always a little check inside the vest, which has got the correct size for the canister inside all the modern vests. Please don't ask me if that happened 10 years ago, Claire, because I'm just not sure. I need to do more research to know whether that happened 10 years ago.
I was actually going to ask you, say if you were in a family and two people had two different branded vests,
yeah,
are the canisters all the same, or do you actually have to pay attention?
You have to pay attention to the user manual, whoever's provided the air jacket, because not all the canisters fit each jacket. Different brands have different canisters that fit different ways. And so therefore, that's where the consumer must follow the user manual advice on something like that.
I know, I don't know whether it's just me, but whenever I get anything vaguely technical, the user manual tends to be put in a corner and never looked at. So this is one where people should actually read.
It's one of those things where it should have been read. In a world going forward, we're hoping very much to be able to keep in touch with the consumer with personal protective equipment via email and via platforms, social media platforms, just so that these basic reminders can be done much more simply. Because you're quite right about the user manual; they're very often discarded far too early in the life of the product, probably. But,
or you're like me, and I have a very large drawer full of user manuals. So in terms of, we were talking about looking after, and we mentioned servicing, how often would you recommend an Airvest serviced, and why is it so important to have it serviced? Because we would say hats, the fit should be checked, but we're not talking about the fit, we're talking about the operation of the garment.
Yeah. But this is basically to do with the amount of use. If a rider was riding every single day, then it's obviously an integral part of their every single day safety equipment. So that product should be serviced far more regularly than somebody that's leisure riding twice a month.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a product that's been used 24 times a year does not need the same service and attention that a garment that's been used 350, 60 times a year. So fundamentally, it's to do with the amount of use. However, if an air jacket has been fired more than half a dozen times, and the consumer therefore has had quite a number of falls, that would trigger, really, I think it's time to have that checked or serviced. If a rider falls off and there is clearly a significant mark of some description on the jacket or the vest, that would also trigger a service. And also, consumer confidence is really important. If the customer's fallen off and had a very unpleasant accident and wants to know for sure that the next time they wear it, that's also a thing. Because so reassuring people is really important part of our job today. And with the likes of the social media, it's not getting harder in that respect. As if you can communicate, we can give you a very quick verbal, actually, wow, that does need a check, you know, or no, relax, please relax. Because what we don't want is an air jacket coming back whilst it's being actively used. So if the customer who's riding every day, we're always wanting a holiday. It's far more important for the holiday in 3 months' time than to rush it back exactly after 12 months. It's that week when you don't need it. That's when we need it.
And is it important to send it? Would you only service Helite vests? So it's important that the vest goes back to the right place.
We are Helite. We can only service Helite vests. Yes.
Yeah, and that's the same for all
manufactured by Helite. For other brands would also fall into the category. We could look after and service those. So other brands that have had their products made by Helite, there are one or two. who've done that. So we could look after those. If it's a Helite airbag system, we can check it and look it out and service it. And if we're in doubt here in the UK, they go back to the factory in France. So if there's ever an issue of complication.
And another aspect, I suppose, just briefly, is that the fitting, people think, oh, Airvest, the fit isn't so important, but it is, isn't it? It is important.
It is important. It is important. We attach a great deal of, a relative amount of importance to rider comfort, because you're the consumer's wearing it. What we don't want is a negative about the fit stopping the customer and leaving it in the tack room. That's not what we're after, because that day they didn't want to put it on because it was either too tight or it didn't feel comfortable. So fitting is really, it is important. Although an Airvest can work when it's too big or too small, the fitting is important, and the user guides are reasonably accurate. But it's never a problem to ask for advice from a reseller of the product. So if that's helpful, and
yeah. No, it is. And so just to sort of conclude, have you got any tips that we haven't mentioned that may actually help people when it comes to looking after their vests?
I think, one of the most important ones, Claire, is if you have activated your vest and you've had an accident, it sounds, in a recycle world, not the right thing to do. Get rid of that canister. It is really unfortunate that because we forget things, an air jacket that has been used, that canister must come out of the air jacket as quickly as possible before there's any chance that anybody can forget or pass that air jacket on, because there is no way an air jacket works twice on one canister. And yet we get them back. We can tell. Yeah.
You can tell if a canister's been fired.
Yeah.
But I do take your point.
Story about that. Do you want a good story or not?
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
A lawyer in Dublin bought a motorbike jacket, and he rang me up 3 months after he bought it and said, I need to tell you something. I fell off at the weekend. My jacket didn't go off, Peter. I need to tell you now, I'm a lawyer and I'm not happy. So I was very nervous about the phone call, clearly. And so I said, well, you're in Dublin. I'm in Harrogate. Could you open take out your canister and tell me if it's clearly been used? And he said, yes, it's been used. And I just said to him, is there any chance at all that your jacket could have been used twice? Could anybody else in your family have used the jacket? And there was a long pause, and then a lot of Irish swear words, which I won't repeat in this program, where he realized his son had borrowed his jacket at the weekend, fallen off, frightened to tell his dad that he'd fallen off, didn't want to tell him, and put it back together again.
Oh,
so
dear.
A lot of swearing. He let me off. He said, "You go away. That's the end of this case." But that's just how these things can happen. And whilst that was a father and son with a motorbikes, it could happen in an equestrian family where a younger person had activated a parent's vest and didn't want them to know. You know, it's really important. So get rid of the canister, because that's the one single thing that can lead to total failure. The others are just useful tips, really, about maintenance and cleaning and checking. And,
do you offer?
Make sure you clip on them.
Yeah, and do you offer a reminder service? So if somebody buys a vest and that just about the servicing, so it's a bit like worming your horses or your vet, do you offer that service?
We are changing our systems to do exactly that, because what we GDPR has slowed down this process, because what we are allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do, we've had to look very carefully and make sure we don't break any GDPR regulations. But yes, it is our intention within the next 12 months, there will be a reminder service where it's done with the consumer purchase the jacket, and we are just offering out basic safety advice online via email or other social media platforms. so that the consumer is going to get an improved reminder service update requirement than they did 10 years ago, because it didn't happen 10 years ago. That kind of service wasn't available.
No, and just before we conclude, Danielle, who I know is in America actually, has commented somebody needs to offer a recycling program for canisters.
Yeah, Danielle is correct, particularly about what I said about canisters.
Is there? Can they be recycled? Is there? Do you just have to put them in the waste?
In the waste recycle, please? We can't. The reason is because there is no refiller of CO2 canisters in Europe yet. We cannot reuse them. So, were anybody to certify the refilling of CO2 canisters, the first customer would be Helite. We would buy them, but we can't use them because they are not CE certified. So
right.
They
Okay.
go at the moment in the recycle bin.
So you can put it in your in the recycling bin rather than in the black bin.
Oh, you can. It'll go in metals and other objects in that category. Yeah, no problem.
Oh, that's really useful. Thank you. I didn't know that. Thank you, Danielle. So that's that's really useful. Peter, thank you so much. I think. Pleasure. I don't know. I don't know whether it's. I don't like to gender specify, but I think. I know that you've said this, that in the motorcycle world, vests tend to be looked after a lot better. And I think in the equestrian world, we're so used to not having to pay attention to something that has the moving parts that we take it for granted it's always going to be there and work. So I think you've highlighted some really important and key points for people to be aware that there is a degree of responsibility. If you own one of these vests, you must take responsibility for looking after it. Yeah,
it's the way of the world, and I think with it, as I've said before, with the improved media attention and email and the ways we've got of communicating, it's likely to improve, and certainly we're committed to trying to make it improve and give a better after-sales care.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. It's been really, really interesting. Thank you so much, Peter. And for those who are watching, we are running a competition to win a Helite vest later in the week. So look out for that. Peter, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.